Confident, confident, confident. I can be confident, 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 confident. I can be confident at work.
Hello and welcome to the Confident at Work podcast. I'm your host and your confidence coach, Anna Manning, and today we're talking about how to take care of difficult emotions. And a couple that I've picked out are worry and anxiety because they're the specific examples that I've dealt with. And they're the ones that I want to talk through with you to give you an idea of this technique, this little tool that I use, which has been the most helpful thing I've ever learned about how to take care of my emotions. And I don't call it how to manage your emotions, but how to take care of your emotions, or maybe even how to take care of yourself when you're experiencing those emotions that you find really difficult or really uncomfortable. I actually think this is a vital skill for work because there are times, especially if you're listening to a podcast called Confident at Work, where you might not be feeling confident, you might not be feeling great, and you might be feeling something else in its place, whether that is panic or dread or fear or anxiety or worry, right? There's all different kinds of things you could be feeling other than confident, and that I feel too. So I was prompted to do this episode because I keep talking to people about that movie Inside Out. The first one came out a few years ago, but the second one's out. So people are kind of talking to me about it again. And occasionally a client will say, "Oh, I've seen this film with my kids, and there's this little emotion, and it's called angry, and it like lives inside this little girl, and it's this like red character, and it's really mad all the time." And that kind of crosses over with my way of thinking about it and the tool that I'm going to share with you today. So, for many of us, when we experience an uncomfortable emotion, and this definitely used to be me until I learned how to do this in a way that I found good, I found useful for me, I would, if I experienced an emotion like if I felt anxious or I felt nervous or I felt worried about something, I would just try and ignore it, or I would try and get rid of it, or I might even try and fight it. I might try and sort of squash it down, or I might logic over it, which would be to say, well, I shouldn't feel like this because this actually thing is going to be okay, and this, that, and the other. And none of those things really, to be truthful, ever worked. But that is what a lot of us will do when we're experiencing an emotion, which is difficult. Ignore it, get rid of it, fight it, try and squash it, or logic over it. Tell ourselves, well, we shouldn't be feeling like that. I don't know about you, but I've never found any of those particularly useful or particularly helpful. And I now have a way of dealing with it, which I find to be much better. So I'm going to share it. And it's quite personal, this. I even talked to my partner about it. I was like, do you think I should tell people about this on the podcast? And he was like, no. So here we are. And I hope you find it useful. I started using this technique when I suffered with a period of anxiety in the summer of 2021. Do you remember that? Like lockdown, COVID. It, and I'd never really experienced anxiety before. Like I had in acute situations. I'd never experienced it as like a prolonged ongoing state. And at first I didn't even know what it was. I was like, I've got this weird feeling in my chest. And someone said, "Oh, that's anxiety." I was like, "Oh, weird." Anyway, it came and it stayed for months, months and months on end. And a lot of the time it was present all the time that I was awake. So all day, every day. And at points I could manage that. And at points it just felt really debilitating and really depressing. And I was like, am I going to feel like this forever? This is absolutely awful. I mean, I take my hat off to anyone who experiences chronic anxiety. You guys are absolute troopers because it really is tricky. And it turned out when I started experiencing this really tricky emotion that was there a lot of the time, that I didn't have any real good ways of dealing with it. My ways of dealing with it, like I said, were to try and ignore it, or to try and get rid of it, or to try and fight it, or to try and squash it, or to try and logic over why I'm actually fine and I shouldn't feel like this. And I also felt some other kinds of emotions like annoyance, frustration, even embarrassment that I was experiencing this and experiencing it such that it was, it was getting in the way of my life. And it wasn't until I did some particular um, therapy, body based therapy, that was designed to help with anxiety. And shout out to Sarah and Chelsea at Healing Embodied. So they talk about relationships and anxiety. And I thought, well, they seem to know how to help people with anxiety. So maybe they could help me. And they did. And one of the things that they taught me, among many, was this exercise that I still use to this day. I might have talked about it before on the podcast, but I've never done a whole episode about it. So I call it the Wispy Ghost. And we were asked to just close our eyes and relax, like do a bit of a visualization, meditation type of thing, where we invited the anxiety into the room, right? So I'm imagining this. And when I did that, it was at the door and it was really weird. It was a little ghost type character, like a wispy kind of ghost with a little butt. And it was stood at the door. And I said, you can come in because we were told, like, invite the anxiety into the room. So I said, oh, you can come in. And it stood at the door and it was like, you don't want me here. I looked at it and I thought, well, that's kind of true. And I said, no, it's okay. You can come in because that was the exercise, right? We had to invite it in. And it stood at the door and it said, I know you hate me. I know you don't want me here. And it looked really sad. And I was like, oh dear. And because it was such a cute little character, I softened slightly towards this anxiety just for a moment. And I said, no, come on, it's okay. I said, I know that maybe I haven't wanted you here, but we can talk now. Anyway, so the anxiety comes into the room and they're kind of leading the visualization, and Sarah was leading it, and she said, you can see if you can interact with it, maybe you can talk to it, maybe you can even kind of physically interact with it. And then she kind of left us to just imagine that. And I had a conversation with this little wispy ghost with the butt, and it was really cute. And we talked all about the anxiety, and I said, what's it like for you? What does it feel like for you to be anxiety, to feel anxious all the time? And it was like, it's awful. It's really awful. And I'm getting emotional talking about it. And it said, it's really awful. And I'm all alone. And seeing it as this like little character, even in my imagination, just it did something to kind of change my relationship with that emotion that I was feeling. Because before I'd been, as I said, trying to get rid of it, being annoyed about it, being frustrated with it. And suddenly I kind of felt this softening towards it. And I said, well, what would make you feel better? And this thing said, well, I like hugs, which is funny because I love hugs. And so I said, okay, well, I'm here. I could give you a hug. And so I imagined this little kind of ghost thing, and it climbed up onto my chest. And I imagined just holding it on my chest and hugging it. And it was the natural thing for me to do was to I felt kind of quite maternal towards it. And I said, it's okay. Don't worry. I'm here now. I'm going to take care of you. I'm never going to tell you to go away again. Don't worry. Like, I've got you. I can hold you. Blah. And this thing on my chest, and actually the anxiety was in my chest, right? So I imagine this thing lying on my chest where the anxiety was that I'd been feeling for months on end. And this thing finally kind of softened and relaxed because it was like given space and taken care of. And I was like, wow, that was a completely different experience than the way I had been trying to deal with and manage this emotion for months on end. Actually, taking care of it was the only thing that I really needed to do in that moment to soothe it. Now, that didn't mean that it didn't come back over that period. It did. many times. But what I realized after doing that exercise was I now had a way, I now had a tool where I could at least do some what they would call, I guess, self soothing. Instead of trying to fight it and be annoyed with it and be pissed off and, try and get rid of it and tensing up against it, I would invite it and I would say, "Oh, you're here. You're here. Like, come, and be with me. Come and relax. Come and let me give you a hug." And I would just imagine doing this. I know it sounds crazy, but I would just imagine doing this. And that act of taking care of it and accepting it and saying, "Oh, you're here. Like, it's great to see you. I love having you with me. And you can come now and just let me hold you." That was completely transformative for me. And I've occasionally shared this, I think, over on the podcast over the years. But also, I've occasionally shared this with a client if they're struggling with big or uncomfortable emotions at work or around work, because let's face it, sometimes around work, we have really big emotions that feel really difficult for us to manage. And that might be in the moment, or it might be on Sunday night, or it might be at 3 in the morning when we wake up. And I think most of my clients are kind of like me, where I didn't really have any tools to take care of myself when I was experiencing those big emotions. And I wanted to share this in case you could use this same little tool. Now, you might think, okay, that's not going to work for me at all. Fine. But I invite you, and if it feels right for you, only if it feels right for you, and only if it feels safe for you, that this could be a way of taking care of yourself when emotions are really high. So, previous to this, I'd only actually used it with anxiety, and I don't experience it all the time anymore like I did, but very occasionally I feel it again. And it's got to the point where if I experience it, I'm like, "Oh, you're back. I haven't seen you in ages. How are you?" And how weird, how different is that than how I used to experience that anxiety, which was like the battle of wills, which I totally lost. Totally different way of dealing with it, and totally a better, for me, way of dealing with it. And then last week, I woke up at 3 in the morning, as you do sometimes, and my brain was already going 10 to the dozen about some family situation, right? This personal life situation. I noticed that I felt something in my body and I was like, "Oh, is it anxiety?" And so I think I was half asleep, to be honest, but I just went into my usual patter and I was like, "Hi." And I saw anxiety like raise its head from sleep and say, "It's not me, it's him." And pointed over and I was like, "Who are you?" And it was like, "I'm Worry." And Worry was like, it looked like a character from Inside Out. I don't know if there is one called Worry, but maybe there is. And it was like this little character and it had its like hands together and it was like, I can't show you because we don't have a podcast where you can look at me, but it had its hands like across its chest and it was like playing with its fingers and looked really worried. And I said, "Oh, hello. I haven't really met you before." And it said, "Yeah." I was like, okay, I could just use exactly the same technique that I used with the anxiety. Maybe it would work with worry. And what do you know? It did. So I said to Worry, "Oh, can I help you? Tell me, tell me what's happening. What are you worried about? Would you like a hug? Would you like to sit on my knee?" Same patter, right, as with the anxiety. And the Worry said a few things, but it mainly just wanted to, you know, chill there, mainly just wanted to be noticed, probably just wanted to be accepted, soothed, looked after, like most of us do when we're feeling something. So turns out this worked with Worry as well for me. And now because I'm talking about anxiety, I can feel it in my chest. It sometimes comes up when I talk about it. It's like it's being called up. I'm not anxious about anything, but I can experience anxiety right now in my chest. And I experience it as this kind of tightening across the right side of my throat. You might be able to hear it. And a sort of stippling feeling in the right side of my chest. And so I would just do what I always do and say, hello, it's nice to see you again. I haven't seen you in ages. Hope you've been somewhere nice, doing something good. How are you? And the anxiety smiles. And I no longer feel it. Literally, it's gone. Melted into nothing in my chest. So, I don't want to say that this is a quick fix, quick stitch, quick hack. Sometimes these problems are chronic and really, really difficult to live with. I know that because I've experienced it and you might have too. So I'm not saying that this is a panacea, but what I am saying is that if this feels right for you or if it feels interesting to you, it could be something that you have in your toolkit to look after yourself and your emotions when they feel hard, when they feel horrible. It's actually a part of a low confidence cycle, not taking care of yourself, not taking care of your emotions. And it does actually relate to confidence because sometimes when you have an absence of confidence, like I said at the beginning of the episode, you're going to feel something else instead in a moment, whether that's panic, worry, nerves. And it's great to know how to take care of yourself when you're feeling emotions like that, because the chances are you've still got to get on and do whatever it was you were trying to do. You've still got to get up there and make the presentation. You've still got to go to that board meeting. You've still got to show up when you're sat in your car in the morning feeling really anxious. You've still got to show up for work, right? All of us, generally, this is what we have to do. And confidence is not always the thing that we feel. So when we don't, could this be a tool that you could use? Could this be something that might help you? Could you talk to the emotion? Could you welcome it in? Could you ask it, what's it like to be you? Could you offer it some kind of safety or support? Could you find out what it would need? What would make it feel better? What would soothe it? And what I found out is it's the very same stuff that would make me feel better and soothe me. And I think this exercise actually stands to reason when you look at it logically, because you know, when you're experiencing a really big emotion and somebody would just take you in their arms and hold you tight and say, I'm here. They accept you, they embrace you, and they just love you and support you. That's what you need when you're experiencing a big emotion. You don't need somebody trying to tell you that you shouldn't be feeling like that, or invalidating you, or fighting with you, or trying to squash you down or push you away. That's the last thing you need when you're experiencing a big emotion. And yet, when I didn't know how to deal with mine, that's what I was doing to myself. I would never have wanted that from anyone else, but that's what I was doing to myself. And now I've learned this new way, this way that like opens my own arms and says, come and be with me. I will take care of you. I will never reject you. I will be with you. That has been transformative for me. And I share it in case it can be helpful for you too. I will see you in next week's episode. Bye.
Confident, confident, confident. I can be confident, 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 confident. I can be confident at work.